Every day, 100 people walked through that door. But that afternoon, one broken voice changed everything.
I can't afford it.
She whispered 4 words that stopped him cold. I can't afford it.
He didn't think twice. No kid should lose their birthday over an empty wallet. Wait, ma'am!
It is already taken care of. It is already paid for, he said.
Every kid deserves a cake on their birthday.
What happened next didn't just save a birthday. It changed both of their lives forever.
The bell above the door chimed at 4:47 in the afternoon, and Ethan Cole would remember that exact time for the rest of his life. If you've ever watched a stranger's whole world nearly collapse in front of you, and then found yourself unable to just stand there and let it happen, you already know exactly what's coming. And if you've never felt that pull to help someone who has nothing left to give back, stay with me, because by the end of this video, I promise you'll understand it. Before we go any further, if stories like this move you the way they move me, hit that like button and subscribe because there's a lot more heart where this came from. Ethan had owned Golden Crust Bakery for 6 years, ever since his wife Claire passed away and left him staring down a life he never expected to live alone. He was 35 years old, a single father to an 8-year-old daughter named Lily, and most days he ran on coffee, muscle memory, and whatever emotional reserves he'd managed to scrape together the night before. The bakery sat on the corner of Maple and 3rd, its teal awning faded just enough to look lived in rather than neglected, its windows always fogged faintly with the warmth of the ovens inside. Ethan had built that place brick by brick, both literally and figuratively, in the years after Claire died, because baking was the one thing that let his hands stay busy while his mind grieved. He told people it was Claire's recipe book that saved him. What he never told anyone was that some mornings, he still set 2 cups of coffee on the counter out of habit, before catching himself and pouring the second one down the drain. Lily was in 2nd grade now, a bright, curious kid who liked to sit on the bakery's back stool after school and do her homework surrounded by the smell of vanilla and yeast. She was the reason Ethan got up every morning at 4:30 to start the ovens. She was the reason he still believed, somewhere underneath the exhaustion, that life could still hand you something good if you kept showing up for it. That particular Tuesday had been slow, the kind of gray in-between afternoon where the bakery felt sleepy and half-lit. Most of the morning rush long gone and the dinner crowd not yet arrived. Ethan was behind the counter, restocking the display case with fresh macarons, half listening to the radio playing low in the back kitchen, when the bell above the door rang. The woman who walked in looked like she was carrying something heavier than the tote bag on her shoulder. She was maybe early 30s, with light brown hair pulled back in a hurried ponytail, wisps escaping around her face, and the kind of exhaustion in her eyes that Ethan recognized instantly. Not the exhaustion of a bad day, but the exhaustion of a bad year. She wore a faded green cardigan over a white blouse, both slightly too big on her, like she'd lost weight she hadn't meant to lose. She approached the counter with a small, apologetic smile, the kind people wear when they're about to ask for something they're embarrassed to need. "Hi," she said. "I placed an order last week, a birthday cake for my son, Whitfield. It should be ready for pickup Saturday." Ethan's part-time cashier, a 19-year-old named Priya, pulled up the order on the tablet. "Yes, Tommy's cake, chocolate with a dinosaur theme. It's already started. We've got the fondant dinosaurs drying in the back." The woman's smile faltered just slightly, but Ethan caught it. He was good at catching things like that. 6 years of watching grief move through his own face in mirrors had taught him to read the small cracks in other people's composure. "I actually," she started, then stopped, glancing down at her hands. "I need to cancel it. I'm so sorry. Something came up and I can't afford it right now. I should have called ahead. I know. I'm sorry for the trouble." Her voice cracked on the last word, barely, but enough. Priya, flustered, started fumbling with the tablet, saying something about refund policies and deposits, but Ethan had already stopped restocking the macarons. He stood there for a second, dish towel still in his hand, watching this stranger try to hold herself together over what was, on the surface, just a cake. But Ethan knew, the way you know things when you've lived through your own version of them, that this was never just about a cake. "Is everything okay?" he asked, before he could stop himself. The woman looked up, startled that he'd spoken directly to her. "Oh, yes, sorry, it's fine. It's just been a rough month. My son's birthday is Saturday and I wanted to do something nice, but I lost some hours at work and things are just tighter than I planned. I'll figure something out for him. A cake from the grocery store will be fine. He won't even notice." But the way she said it, too fast, too rehearsed, like she'd already practiced convincing herself, told Ethan everything he needed to know. This wasn't a woman who didn't care. This was a woman who cared so much it was breaking her, and she was trying to protect her son from ever seeing the cracks. "What's your son's name?" Ethan asked. "Tommy. He's turning 7 Saturday." "Dinosaurs, huh?" Despite everything, a small, real smile broke through. "He's obsessed. Won't shut up about the T-Rex." Ethan nodded slowly, and something settled into place behind his eyes. The same quiet certainty he felt the day he decided to name the bakery after his grandmother's recipe book. The same certainty he felt the first time he held Lily as a newborn and understood instantly that his whole life had just reorganized itself around keeping her safe. He wasn't a man who made big, dramatic gestures. He barely had the bandwidth most days to keep his own life stitched together. But some decisions don't ask for your bandwidth. They just arrive, fully formed, and all you have to do is not talk yourself out of them. "Priya," he said, "don't cancel the order." The woman blinked. "No, really, it's okay. I don't want to." "It's already paid for," Ethan said gently. "Consider it a gift from the bakery. We do this sometimes for the neighborhood." That last part wasn't entirely true. He'd never done this before in his life. But he said it with enough calm conviction that it sounded like established policy rather than a decision he'd made 11 seconds earlier. The woman's face went through about 4 different expressions in the span of 2 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, the beginning of an argument, and then finally something that cracked wide open. Her eyes filled fast, the way eyes do when a person has been holding something together with sheer willpower for far too long and suddenly doesn't have to anymore. "I can't let you do that," she said, even as her voice wavered. "You don't even know us." "I know a kid's about to turn 7, Ethan said, "and I know his mom walked in here trying to make sure he still got a good birthday even when things are hard. That's enough for me." Her name, she told him once she'd composed herself enough to speak, was Sarah Whitfield. She'd moved to town 8 months earlier after a divorce that had left her with full custody of Tommy and about half the income she used to have. She worked the front desk at a dental office, picked up shifts wherever she could, and had been quietly, carefully rationing every dollar since the day the papers were finalized. She hadn't told anyone at Tommy's school that things were tight. She hadn't told her own mother, 3 states away, because she didn't want the "I told you so" that would inevitably come wrapped inside the sympathy. She had, in fact, told almost no one, until she stood at a bakery counter and a stranger noticed the crack in her voice before she even finished her sentence. "You don't have to explain any of this to me," Ethan told her, sliding a box of day-old cookies across the counter for her to take home. "But if you want to talk, I'm usually here till close." Sarah didn't take him up on it that day. She left with quiet thanks and red eyes, promising to come back Saturday for the cake. But something had shifted, the way things shift after a small kindness lands exactly where a person needed it most. Over the next few days, Ethan found himself thinking about Tommy's birthday more than he probably should have for a kid he'd never met. He remembered Lily's 7th birthday, 2 years after Claire died. How he'd nearly broken down in the party aisle at the store because Claire always used to be the one who handled the decorations, and he hadn't known the first thing about balloon arches or the right kind of streamers. A friend from the neighborhood, an older woman named Dolores who ran the flower shop 2 doors down, had noticed him standing frozen in the aisle and had quietly taken over, organizing half the party herself without ever making him feel like he needed saving. Ethan had never forgotten that. He'd promised himself, somewhere in the haze of that grief, that he'd pay it forward when the moment came. So when Saturday arrived, Ethan didn't just have the cake ready. He'd spent 2 nights after closing, once Lily was asleep at his sister's place down the street, working on something more. He called Dolores, who once she heard the story, insisted on donating a dinosaur-themed balloon arch on the spot. He talked to Marcus, who ran the print shop and owed Ethan a favor from a wedding cake disaster the year before, and got a Happy Birthday Tommy banner printed by Friday afternoon. He even reached out to a few regular customers, people who came in every week for their coffee and croissants, mentioning, carefully, without making it a whole production, that a little boy in the neighborhood could use some birthday cheer. Word moved fast in a town like theirs. By Friday night, Ethan had more offers of help than he knew what to do with. A woman from the church down the road offering to bring a stack of wrapped toys, a retired teacher offering to bring party games, a teenager who did face painting for extra cash offering his services for free. None of it was Ethan's plan, not really. He'd only meant to save a cake. But kindness, it turned out, was contagious in a way few things were, and once people caught wind of what he'd done, they wanted in. There was, of course, a complication, because there almost always is. Ethan's business partner and the bakery's silent investor, a practical, numbers-driven man named Roger, found out about the free cake and the mounting list of donated extras and was not thrilled. "We run on thin margins as it is, Ethan," Roger said, standing in the kitchen doorway with his arms crossed while Ethan piped the last dinosaur onto the cake Saturday morning. You can't just start giving away product every time somebody has a sad story. Everybody's got a sad story. This isn't about everybody, Ethan said, not looking up from his work. This is about a kid. It's always about a kid, or a mom, or somebody's sick grandmother. I get it. But we've got payroll to make, Ethan. We can't run a charity. Ethan set down his piping bag and looked at his old friend and business partner, because that's what Roger was, beneath the spreadsheets and the worry, a friend who'd helped him keep the lights on during the hardest years of his life. You remember when Claire died, and you covered 2 months of my share of the lease without ever bringing it up. You remember that? Roger's jaw tightened. That's different. It's not, Ethan said quietly. It's the exact same thing. Somebody needed help, and you didn't do the math on it. You just did it. I'm not saying we do this every week. I'm saying some things are worth the cost of doing business. Roger didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he sighed, rubbed the back of his neck, and reached for his wallet. Fine, but the balloon arch is coming out of my pocket, not the bakery's. And you're telling me every single time you decide to be a saint from now on. Deal? Deal, Ethan said, and meant it. Saturday afternoon, Sarah arrived at the small community room she'd rented above the hardware store, the cheapest venue she could find, with folding chairs and fluorescent lighting she tried to soften with a string of dollar store lights. She walked in carrying the cake box Ethan had personally delivered that morning, expecting a small, quiet gathering, herself, Tommy, and the 4 kids from his class, whose parents had confirmed they were coming. What she found instead stopped her cold in the doorway. The room had been transformed. A dinosaur-themed balloon arch curved over the entrance. A Happy Birthday Tommy banner stretched across the far wall in bold green letters shaped like leaves. There were folding tables covered in butcher paper that kids could color on, a face painting station already set up with a teenager sorting through brushes, and impossibly nearly 20 people milling around. Some she recognized vaguely from the neighborhood, most she didn't recognize at all. Dolores was arranging a vase of flowers on the gift table. The retired teacher was setting up a pin-the-tail game modified into pin the spike on the dinosaur. And near the back, wearing his coral apron over a clean teal shirt, stood Ethan, carefully setting the cake down on its table of honor. Sarah stood frozen in the doorway for so long that Tommy, tugging at her hand, finally said, "Mom, are we going in or what?" She couldn't speak. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth, and the tears that had been sitting just beneath the surface all week finally spilled over. Not from sadness this time, but from something so much bigger than sadness that she didn't have a word for it yet. Ethan looked up, saw her standing there, and crossed the room. "You didn't have to do all this," she managed, once she could talk again. "I didn't do all this," Ethan said. "I made a phone call. Everybody else did the rest. That's kind of how this town works when you give it a reason." Tommy, meanwhile, had already spotted the balloon arch and the dinosaur cake and had abandoned all pretense of composure, sprinting toward Dolores to ask if the vase of flowers had any real dinosaur bones hidden in it. The party that followed was loud and messy and full of cake frosting on small faces and one broken balloon that made a 7-year-old cry for exactly 90 seconds before he forgot about it entirely. It was, by any objective measure, a wildly successful birthday party, the kind that costs thousands of dollars when event planners are involved, thrown together in 4 days by a neighborhood that decided a little boy deserved better than a store-bought sheet cake and a quiet apartment. Near the end of the party, once the sugar high had settled and the parents were starting to gather coats and half-empty goodie bags, Sarah found Ethan by the drinks table, quietly cleaning up stray napkins. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "Really, this isn't something people do for strangers." "Maybe it should be more often," Ethan said. "I had somebody do something like this for me and my daughter a couple years back. I never got the chance to pay her back directly. This is kind of the closest I've gotten." Sarah tilted her head. "Your daughter?" "Lily, she's 8. My wife passed a few years ago, and there was a stretch there where I couldn't have told you which way was up. A woman down the street, she runs the flower shop actually, she's the one who did your flowers today. She just showed up, didn't ask if I needed help, just started helping. I never forgot what that felt like. Something passed between them then. Not quite romantic, not yet, but something that felt like recognition. 2 people who'd both been quietly rebuilding their lives out of whatever pieces were left, who understood without needing it, explained that some debts don't get repaid to the person who gave them. They get repaid to whoever needs them next. Would it be strange, Sarah asked, if Tommy and I stopped by the bakery sometime? Not for free stuff, just to say hi. It'd be strange if you didn't, Ethan said, smiling for the first time all week in a way that reached his eyes. That visit turned into a weekly one. Tommy started showing up after school some days to do his homework at the same back counter where Lily did hers, And within a month, the two kids had formed the kind of fast, uncomplicated friendship that only children seem capable of. Trading stickers, arguing about whether T-Rexes or Velociraptors were scarier, occasionally roped into helping Ethan frost cupcakes, which mostly meant eating more frosting than they applied. Sarah started picking up shifts at the bakery on weekends, first just to help out of gratitude, then because Ethan genuinely needed the extra hands, and eventually because it had quietly become the best part of her week. Roger, for his part, never let Ethan forget the balloon arch bill, bringing it up at least once a month as a running joke that had, somewhere along the way, become a kind of affectionate ribbing rather than a real grievance. He'd also, quietly, started matching a portion of tips into a small fund the bakery kept behind the counter, what the staff eventually started calling the Tommy jar, meant for exactly this kind of moment, whenever it arose again. And it did arise again, more than once in the months that followed. A father who couldn't afford his daughter's graduation cake, an elderly man ordering a small cake for an anniversary he was clearly grieving through alone. Golden Crust Bakery quietly became known, in the way small towns build reputations, as the place that noticed when someone needed a little extra kindness and never made a show of giving it. 6 months after that first Saturday, Ethan stood behind the counter again, watching Lily and Tommy race each other to see who could stack sprinkle jars into a taller tower without Priya noticing, and Sarah beside him wiping down the espresso machine with the easy familiarity of someone who belonged there. He thought about the version of himself who had almost let that woman walk out the door with nothing but an apology and an empty tote bag. He thought about how close that moment had come to being just another ordinary Tuesday, forgotten by dinner. But it hadn't been ordinary. It had been the moment two broken families found each other, not because either of them had gone looking, but because one man decided that a 7-year-old's birthday cake was worth more than the $50 it cost to save it. If there's one thing this story teaches us, it's that you never really know what someone is carrying when they walk through your door. The woman canceling a cake order isn't lazy or careless. She's often someone fighting a battle you can't see, trying to protect the people she loves from ever noticing the cost. And sometimes the smallest act of noticing, really noticing, is enough to change the entire direction of someone's life. Ethan didn't set out to become a symbol of anything. He just refused to let a kid's birthday become another casualty of a hard year. And in doing that, he didn't just save a cake. He built a family out of two people who never expected to find one again. If this story moved you even half as much as it moved me writing it, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, because we've got a lot more stories like this one coming. And if you've ever been the person who stopped, who noticed, who did the small thing that turned out to be the big thing, tell us about it in the comments. Somebody out there needs to hear it today.